Millionaire secretly meets Mistress pregnant wife, finds out and kicks him out with nothing. They said Michael Redwood had it all: wealth, a sprawling estate, devoted employees, and a beautiful wife expecting his heir. But under the polished surface of charity dinners and high society galas lay secrets that threatened to topple his world. Rumors of an illicit affair with a mysterious woman began circulating in hushed whispers. As his pregnant wife, Elizabeth, felt his distance, she couldn't shake the feeling that her once loving husband was slipping away. When the truth finally exploded into the open, no fortune or social prestige could spare Michael from losing everything. This is the story of betrayal, heartbreak, and an unexpected fight for redemption. Michael Redwood was a name synonymous with success. He was in his mid-30s, tall, and carried himself with an air of quiet confidence. The Redwood family estate in Fairfield County, Connecticut, boasted a sweeping driveway lined with blooming white azaleas in the summer, leading to a stately brick mansion that once belonged to a Gilded Age railroad baron. Michael had taken the mansion into the modern era with top-tier renovations, marble floors, glass chandeliers, and cutting-edge technology in every room. On the surface, he was the enviable picture of a self-made millionaire. Over a decade prior, as a fresh-faced graduate from Columbia University, Michael had leveraged a small inheritance from his late father, Robert Redwood, into a lucrative real estate venture. From flipping houses in struggling neighborhoods to investing in commercial properties that turned eye-popping profits, his Midas touch became almost legendary in the world of property development. But beyond the press releases and philanthropic events was a man whose hunger for success often eclipsed his sense of responsibility. Michael believed in winning at all costs, in business and, unfortunately, sometimes in personal relationships as well. His wife, Elizabeth Redwood née Hastings, was an elegant presence. 5 years younger than Michael, she came from old money, but unlike many of her peers, she was philanthropic to her core. A dedicated volunteer in children's hospitals and community centers, Elizabeth spent her days working on the Redwood Foundation's various projects. Where Michael's eyes were always fixed on the next million-dollar deal, Elizabeth focused on where their fortunes could help others. Their marriage, from the outside, resembled a fairy tale. They hosted lavish dinner parties attended by politicians, socialites, and celebrities. Their photographs graced the Philanthropists of the Year section in national magazines. And now, after 5 years of marriage, Elizabeth was expecting their first child, a blessing that promised to strengthen their family legacy. One summer afternoon, Elizabeth, who was in her 5th month of pregnancy, decided it was time for the two of them to sit down and discuss some changes they needed to make around the house rooms to convert into a nursery, new schedules to accommodate a baby's needs, and the additional help they would require. She imagined Michael might be concerned about his increasingly busy travel schedule, but she had faith that he would adapt. After all, he had always doted on her, right from the moment they met at a charity ball in Manhattan years ago. Michael had been particularly elusive that week. Elizabeth chalked it up to a high-pressure real estate deal he'd been chasing in Boston. She was used to his intense focus whenever he was pursuing a big fish, as he called it. Still, she couldn't ignore a nagging sense of unease that had grown in her gut over the last few months. Little things, Michael's phone constantly buzzing, his abrupt departures for last-minute meetings, and unexplained credit card transactions in places she knew he didn't do business. But Elizabeth was determined to remain trusting. He was her husband, the father of her unborn child, a pillar of society who had proven himself reliable time and again. If there was a shadow looming over them, she wanted to believe it was just her own anxiety playing tricks on her. She breathed in the fragrant summer air, gazing at the subtle shimmer of the estate's backyard swimming pool. She felt a sense of calm and told herself that whatever was burdening Michael, they would face it together. If only she had known the secrets that would soon shatter their perfect world. One particular evening, after Elizabeth had drifted off to sleep, Michael found himself in his home office, lit only by a single lamp on the antique mahogany desk. His phone vibrated a text message from a name he had saved under MH, so Elizabeth wouldn't suspect. In truth, MH stood for Sienna Henderson. Sienna was unlike any woman Michael had encountered. He first met her at a luxury car expo in Manhattan 3 months earlier. She was standing beside a cherry-red Aston Martin, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders, exuding confidence and intrigue in the way she carried herself. Michael had approached her, initially drawn by her beauty, but soon realized Sienna possessed a quick wit and an air of mystery that he found intoxicating. She didn't see him as just a wealthy man. She challenged him, teased him, and even dismissed him when she thought he was trying too hard to impress. He craved that excitement. For years, Michael had lived in a world where everyone either idolized or needed something from him. Here was a woman who treated him like a mere mortal, and it thrilled him in ways he couldn't explain. The line between a harmless flirtation and a dangerous affair blurred the night they shared a glass of champagne at her downtown loft. "Miss you," the text read. Michael typed back a brief reply, "Meet you tomorrow. Same place, 7 p.m. He put the phone down, guilt swirling in his chest. He knew Elizabeth was kind, trusting everything he once thought he wanted in a life partner. Yet, he found himself seeking out Sienna's unpredictability. Why couldn't he have been satisfied with the stable life he had built? Meanwhile, rumors began trickling through the tight-knit circles of high society. A friend of Elizabeth, Sarah Chamberlain, dropped by for afternoon tea and couldn't resist hinting at an unsettling piece of gossip she'd heard at a fundraiser. Some people claimed they saw Michael leaving a hotel bar with an attractive brunette. They left together, stepping into Michael's car. Elizabeth tried to brush off Sarah's insinuations, yet a seed of doubt was planted that day. She began noticing more and more suspicious patterns, late-night calls from unknown numbers, unexplained charges on their joint account in places she had never heard of, and the faint scent of an unfamiliar perfume on his jacket. Word also reached Michael's closest confidant, James Carter, who had gone to college with him. James had always been one to tell Michael the harsh truth, and he was worried. At a charity gala, he cornered Michael near the buffet table, out of earshot of others. "Look, I've heard things," James murmured, swirling a glass of scotch. "I'm not going to judge you, but you need to be careful. Elizabeth's pregnant. For God's sake, don't ruin a good thing." Michael averted his eyes, feigning nonchalance. "Thanks, James, but it's nothing. Don't believe the gossip columns." James placed a hand on Michael's shoulder, searching his eyes. "For the sake of your family, be certain of what you're doing." As Michael walked away, his heart pounded with conflicting emotions. On one hand, he was determined to keep his secret. On the other, a wave of shame threatened to crush him every time he glimpsed Elizabeth's growing belly. She radiated excitement and maternal warmth, carefully planning their baby's future from color schemes for the nursery to potential preschool options. Still, the pull towards Sienna was strong. She represented a life unburdened by responsibilities, a rush of adrenaline he felt he was missing in his day-to-day role as husband and father-to-be. He convinced himself he deserved these stolen moments. Hadn't he worked tirelessly for years to reach his level of success? Outside, the summer air carried whispers of storms brewing on the horizon. Unbeknownst to Michael, forces were aligning that would soon dismantle the illusion of control he believed he held over his life. The next evening, Michael carefully chose his attire. He wanted to appear effortlessly handsome rather than obviously flashy. He selected a tailored navy blazer, charcoal trousers, and a crisp white shirt. No tie to keep it casual. He told Elizabeth he had a business dinner with potential investors in the city. As always, Elizabeth trusted him. She kissed him goodbye at the door, resting her head on his shoulder for a lingering moment before he stepped into his Mercedes. Michael ignored the pang in his chest. He drove to a discreet boutique hotel in the Upper East Side, the Talmadge, where Sienna had booked a suite. This hotel was known among certain circles for its absolute discretion. Sienna was waiting for him in the lobby, wearing a sleek black dress that accentuated her figure. Her eyes flickered with excitement when she saw him. In the privacy of the suite, the two shared a bottle of champagne. Sienna leaned against the window, looking out onto the city skyline. "I was worried you wouldn't come," she said, her voice low, almost vulnerable. It struck Michael that despite her bravado, she had grown attached to him. That realization gave him an odd sense of power. "Of course I came," he replied, placing the champagne flute on a side table. He approached her, gently lifting a strand of hair off her shoulder. "How could I stay away?" For a moment, guilt stabbed at him again. He thought of Elizabeth at home, probably sitting in the living room with a baby name book in her lap. Did she have dinner alone tonight? His heart twisted. He swallowed the discomfort, telling himself he'd deal with it later. Sienna poured them another round and softly traced her finger along Michael's lapel. "What will happen when the baby's born? Will you still be able to sneak away?" Her eyes were hungry for assurance. Michael hesitated before he responded. "I'll make time." The words tasted bitter in his mouth. Part of him wondered, was he lying to her, to himself, or both? Their conversation shifted to more mundane topics, art shows. Sienna wanted to attend. Business deals Michael was negotiating. But beneath the surface, an undeniable tension pulsed. They both knew this relationship was more than a casual fling, yet they also knew it was built on borrowed time. Meanwhile, back at the Redwood estate, Elizabeth tried to sleep. She tossed and turned, feeling an odd emptiness on Michael's side of the bed. She told herself it was just hormones, that expecting mothers often felt anxious. Still, she couldn't fully shake the memory of Sarah Chamberlain's insinuations. Around midnight, she padded to the kitchen in her silk robe to brew herbal tea. In the quiet expanse of the mansion, her mind wandered to lonely thoughts of betrayal. Early the next morning, Michael slipped back into the house, thinking Elizabeth would be asleep. He was startled to find her sitting at the kitchen table, sipping tea. Her eyes were bleary, her hair disheveled. She looked so young and fragile in that moment that he felt a surge of protectiveness. Elizabeth gave him a small smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Long night?" she asked softly. He nodded, not meeting her gaze. "Yes, sorry, it ran later than expected." Elizabeth said nothing else. She simply studied him for a few seconds, then stood up and walked over to the sink. Watching her, Michael was seized by a foreboding sense that the walls were slowly closing in. He forced a grin and made his way upstairs, determined to shake off the ominous feeling. Unbeknownst to him, Elizabeth had already begun her own quiet investigation. She couldn't allow herself to fully trust or to fully believe the rumors. She needed proof. And so, the first tiny crack in their marriage, once thought unbreakable, widened. Determined to protect her marriage and dispel any doubts, Elizabeth decided to take methodical steps. She began by examining the details of Michael's schedule. She'd known him for years, had been by his side as he built his empire, and was familiar with his legitimate business patterns. She felt she could distinguish normal real estate deals from a suspicious new pattern if one truly existed. Quietly, she started making notes. When Michael said he was meeting with Jonas and company, investors, she'd mark the time and place he claimed to be. She'd then compare that to the credit card statements, discovering whether the charges aligned with the hotel restaurant or if they were located elsewhere. It was painstaking work, but she did it with calm resolve. Simultaneously, Elizabeth confided in a close friend outside their usual social circle, Monica Reyes, an old college roommate who now worked in private investigations. Monica had always teased Elizabeth that she was wasting her keen observation skills on philanthropic committees. Now, Elizabeth hoped those skills could be put to better use. "I never wanted to believe I'd need something like this," Elizabeth confessed to Monica over the phone. "But I can't confront Michael without real evidence. He's so convincing that I might end up believing him if he denies it outright." Monica's voice was reassuring. "You're doing the right thing. Emotions are high, but it's important to stay grounded in facts before you act. I can help discreetly verify some of his movements if you'd like." Elizabeth hesitated, then agreed. Part of her felt guilty for spying on her husband, the man she'd pledged to love through thick and thin. Yet, the bigger part of her was outraged that he might be making a fool of her, especially when she was pregnant with his child. One evening, when Michael claimed he had to fly to Boston for a pivotal meeting, Elizabeth called Monica. "Follow him," she requested, a slight tremor in her voice. "See where he really goes." Michael left in the late afternoon, a garment bag slung over his shoulder, hugging Elizabeth lightly before heading out. Monica was already waiting in her car near the Redwood estate. She trailed Michael's Mercedes along the highway for almost an hour. Instead of heading to the airport, Michael veered off toward a smaller town. Monica watched as he pulled into a high-end resort nestled by a lake. He parked, and, moments later, a woman in a red coat slipped into his car. Monica snapped a few photos on her phone, capturing the unmistakable forms of Michael Redwood and Sienna Henderson locked in an embrace. Back at the Redwood mansion, Elizabeth was pacing her bedroom. She glanced at the crib that had just been delivered, still in its packaging, waiting to be assembled for their baby. Her stomach roiled with anticipation and dread. A short while later, her phone buzzed with a message from Monica. "I have proof. Call me." That night, Elizabeth cried herself to sleep for the first time since her mother's funeral. She kept hearing Michael's lies reverberate in her mind: work trips, investor dinners, urgent business calls. In that moment, all the illusions of her marriage began to fracture. Yet, she wasn't entirely ready to confront him. She knew a confrontation would unleash chaos, and she wanted to gather her strength and think of the baby. Her father had always taught her never to go to battle unprepared. So Elizabeth decided to wait, to plan her moment carefully, to protect her unborn child's future. She determined that she would not be the only one who lost out when the truth came to light. Michael's double life was becoming more complicated. His every waking moment felt like a juggling act. On one side, he had his wife, the woman carrying his child, his social equal at banquets, the benevolent face behind the Redwood Foundation. On the other, he had Sienna, a woman who ignited a passion in him he hadn't felt in years. He sensed time was running out, though he was too consumed by temptation to stop. Late one night, guilt overcame him. He was in bed, staring at the dark ceiling, listening to Elizabeth's soft breathing. The baby's due date was inching closer. Elizabeth's belly had grown more pronounced, and Michael often felt the baby kick against his palm when he remembered to ask about her day or rub her stomach. Each time he experienced that tiny flutter, an inexplicable fear and guilt surfaced. What was he doing? "Are you all right?" Elizabeth murmured, turning slightly. The moonlight highlighted the concern etched on her face. "Yeah," he whispered, forcing a gentle smile. "Just thinking about work." She nodded, half asleep, but leaned her head on his shoulder. Eventually, her breathing slowed again, and Michael was left alone with his thoughts. He told himself he had to end things with Sienna. He would do it tomorrow or maybe next week. But soon, very soon. At dawn, he woke early, deciding to clear his head with a run around the estate grounds. He jogged past the meticulously trimmed hedges and through the small orchard. The sky was a blend of pastel pinks and oranges. He recalled the early days of his marriage, when he and Elizabeth dreamed of raising a family on this very property. She had imagined setting up an outdoor children's playhouse under the shade of the big oak tree. That dream was closer than ever to coming true, but now it was tainted by his own betrayal. Michael slowed as he reached the orchard's edge, doubling over as if physically burdened by his secrets. For the first time, he felt real doubt. What if Elizabeth found out? Would she take him for everything he had? Would she be too devastated to keep living with him? Even if she stayed, would their marriage ever recover? The heartbreak in her eyes would be unbearable. Yet, the idea of cutting ties with Sienna also felt agonizing. She had become an escape, a different life, a rush he had grown addicted to. He had convinced himself that he was entitled to chase this thrill, having worked so hard for so long. Deep down, though, the rational side of him recognized that no justification could excuse the pain he was inflicting. Sighing heavily, he wiped the sweat from his brow and jogged back to the house. By the time he stepped into the foyer, he could smell coffee brewing. Elizabeth was in the kitchen, wearing a silky maternity robe and looking radiant. Her hair was pulled into a loose ponytail, and the gentle curve of her stomach was all too real. She handed him a cup of coffee with a small smile. "You look like you've been running for miles," she noted, her tone light, though her eyes held a distant sadness. "Just needed to clear my head," he muttered. She hesitated, as though wanting to say something else. Instead, she just nodded and busied herself with preparing toast. Michael watched her, conflicted, knowing that any day now the fragile facade he'd built could crumble. But he was too paralyzed to act, torn between the life he'd always known and the illicit excitement he couldn't let go of. As the weeks passed, Elizabeth gathered more evidence of Michael's indiscretions. Monica, her friend in private investigations, provided her with a detailed file, photos of Michael and Sienna, entering restaurants, hotels, even stepping onto a yacht Michael had rented under a shell company. The evidence was overwhelming. Elizabeth spent countless nights weeping quietly in the library, clutching the baby monitor that she used to listen to the baby's heartbeat. Every time she saw Michael's face, her anger mingled with a profound sadness. She recalled the vows they had exchanged on their wedding day, to be faithful, to support each other in sickness and in health. It seemed so distant now, as though it had happened to two other people. She wasn't sure what hurt more, his betrayal or the realization that she had never truly known the man she'd married. The Redwood estate felt strangely haunted. The staff sensed the shift in atmosphere. The head housekeeper, Marjorie Cummings, had served Elizabeth since she was a child and had come to live in the Redwood mansion after the wedding. Marjorie noticed Elizabeth's swollen eyes and her pensive silences. One day, in a moment of private concern, Marjorie approached her in the upstairs hallway. "My dear, you don't look well," Marjorie said softly. "If there's anything you need, please remember I'm here for you." Elizabeth nodded, her voice trembling with unspoken pain. "Thank you, Marjorie. I appreciate that more than you know." Marjorie gave her a warm, motherly pat on the arm. She had her suspicions about what might be causing Elizabeth's distress, but she knew better than to voice them. She was certain that her mistress would handle the situation with dignity. One of the more difficult tasks for Elizabeth was pretending everything was normal to the outside world. Invitations for baby showers arrived, and well-wishers dropped off gifts daily, from plush toys to designer baby clothes. Each time, Elizabeth forced a grateful smile, wondering how many of these guests had heard rumors of Michael's infidelity. The Redwood name was always a topic of high interest, especially among the upper crust. Determined not to appear weak or naive, Elizabeth quietly sought legal advice from a reputable family law attorney, Teresa Bloom. Teresa had a formidable reputation and was known for protecting her clients with relentless vigor. Teresa listened intently as Elizabeth hesitantly explained her predicament. "I still love him," Elizabeth confessed, "but I can't let him walk all over me, and I need to think about my child." Teresa sighed, leaning back in her leather chair. "Elizabeth, you have every right to protect yourself and your unborn baby. The law can be on your side if you plan carefully. If you decide to file for divorce or separate, we need to secure your financial stability. Prenups, property divisions, everything must be addressed with precision." Elizabeth clutched her handbag tighter, her eyes brimming. "I'm not sure I want a divorce yet, but I won't be a doormat either. Is there a way to ensure the baby and I are safe if things go badly?" Teresa nodded. "Absolutely. We can set up measures to freeze certain assets, or at least make sure you have control over enough funds and properties to support yourself. If you choose to separate, I'll make sure you have the upper hand." Though Elizabeth left the office with a heavy heart, she felt a spark of empowerment. The knowledge that she had options, that she wasn't merely a victim, gave her a renewed sense of purpose. She was preparing for a storm that felt inevitable, but she would do so on her terms. One thing was certain: if Michael truly was betraying her trust, she would not let him destroy their child's future or hers without a fight. While Elizabeth strategized her next move, Sienna was busy orchestrating hers. She had grown tired of being a clandestine fixture in Michael's life. As the months passed, she realized she wanted more than secret rendezvous and fleeting glimpses of a double life. She saw in Michael not just a wealthy man, but a potential future. Perhaps she believed that with enough pressure he would leave his wife and start anew with her. Or perhaps she simply refused to stay in the shadows forever. One afternoon, Sienna invited Michael to her loft. It was a converted industrial space in a trendy part of Manhattan. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, revealing her collection of abstract paintings and minimalist furniture. Usually Michael would arrive with a playful grin, eager for their trysts. This time, tension lined his features. He suspected Sienna's restlessness. He sensed a confrontation brewing. As soon as he stepped in, Sienna locked the door behind him. "We need to talk," she said, her voice steely. Michael set down his briefcase, exhaling. "All right, I'm listening." She crossed her arms, staring him down. "I'm done with this half-life. I see you once or twice a week if I'm lucky. I can't even call you whenever I want, can't show up at your place. I want more than that." He raked a hand through his hair, throat tight. "Sienna, you know how complicated this is. Elizabeth's pregnant. I can't just—" She cut him off, her anger flaring. "Don't say you can't just leave her. You can do whatever you want. Michael, you're choosing to keep me a secret because you're scared of the fallout. So let me give you a reason to be scared." She leaned forward, her eyes burning with resolve. "You walk away from me, and I'll make sure everyone knows about us. I'll go to the press if I have to." Imagine the headlines. "Michael Redwood's Mistress spills all." Michael felt as though the air had been sucked out of the room. The potential damage to his reputation, to his carefully curated image, was staggering. His pulse thundered in his ears. "Sienna, I don't respond well to threats." She didn't blink. "It's not a threat. It's a fact. If you want me to stay quiet, then prove you want me in your life fully." She paused, her expression unreadable. "Leave her and be with me." He forced himself to keep his voice calm, though panic roiled within him. "You're asking me to walk away from my marriage while Elizabeth is carrying my child. That's cruel, unthinkable." Sienna's lips quivered in a moment of vulnerability. "What about me, Michael? Am I just a fling you'll toss aside once the baby is born? I have feelings too." A complex swirl of emotions warred inside him: remorse, anger, lust, fear. He swallowed hard. "I need time to think. I can't make this decision overnight." Sienna's posture remained defiant, but her eyes flickered with a hint of desperation. "Fine. but don't think time will make me forget what I want. If you won't choose, I'll force your hand." Michael left the loft feeling the walls of his life closing in from all sides. His affair, once thrilling, had become a noose tightening around his neck. Neither Elizabeth nor Sienna seemed likely to sit idly by anymore. He was barreling toward a reckoning, and deep down, he knew it was the result of his own reckless choices. A few days later, Elizabeth decided the moment for confrontation had arrived. She'd spent countless hours crying, raging, and plotting. She was done waiting for Michael to come clean on his own. With the overwhelming evidence Monica had gathered, Elizabeth felt the weight of heartbreak, but she also felt ready to reclaim her dignity. That evening, after dinner, she asked Michael to join her in the living room. She deliberately chose this room because of its large windows overlooking the estate's manicured lawns, a testament to their shared life together, which was now on the brink of collapse. She perched on the edge of a chaise longue, her spine stiff with determination. Michael could sense her unease. He set aside his phone, feeling a pit form in his stomach. "What's on your mind?" he asked softly, attempting to sound casual. Elizabeth inhaled deeply. "I need you to be honest with me." "Are you involved with another woman?" He stiffened. Several seconds ticked by in oppressive silence. Finally, he forced out a half-lie, hoping to salvage the situation. "I've had some meetings with new contacts." "Nothing personal," she cut him off, her voice trembling with controlled anger. "Don't lie to me, Michael. I have pictures, emails, our receipts. I know about Sienna." She pulled a folder from a nearby table and set it down between them. The gesture was almost ceremonial. Michael's eyes fell on the folder, and a wave of nausea swept over him. This was worse than he had imagined. Elizabeth wasn't just suspicious, she had proof. "Elizabeth the First," he began, his voice faltering. Her eyes glistened with tears, though her posture remained firm. "How long?" she demanded. He hesitated, swallowing hard. "A few months." The admission spilled into the room like poison. Elizabeth exhaled, as though releasing something toxic from her lungs. "While I've been carrying our child," she whispered, "you've been sneaking off to be with her." Michael rubbed his temples, the guilt now roaring through his bloodstream. "I'm sorry," he pleaded. "I never wanted to hurt you." "Then why did you do it?" Elizabeth's voice rose, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Was I not enough? Did our vows mean nothing?" He reached out, but she recoiled. "Elizabeth, you're more than enough. This was my failing. There's no excuse. I got caught up in something I didn't know how to stop." She let out a bitter laugh, wiping her tears angrily. "Didn't know how to stop? You're a grown man. You could have walked away from her at any time, but you chose not to." Michael closed his eyes, overwhelmed by shame. "I know. I was stupid, selfish. I can't lose you. I'll end it. I promise." His voice cracked with desperation. She shook her head, clenching her jaw to steady herself. "It's too late for promises. You broke us, Michael. My trust in you is gone." She paused, letting that settle. "I want you out." His eyes flew open, shock registering. "What?" "You heard me. Pack your things. Leave. This is my house too, in fact. Thanks to my father's inheritance, I'm the majority owner of this property. I don't want you under the same roof as me or our child." Fear ignited in his chest. "Elizabeth, please. Let's talk this through. I'll do whatever it takes, therapy, public apology, you name it." "I can't just leave." Her tears fell freely now, her voice ragged with heartbreak. "You already left me, Michael, months ago when you started this affair. I'm just making it official." She looked away, tears glistening on her lashes. "Don't make me call security." Defeated, he rose slowly, feeling as though the ground had been ripped from beneath his feet. He trudged upstairs, numb. Within the hour, he walked out the front door with a suitcase in hand. The grandeur of the estate that once symbolized success and power now felt like a mocking testament to everything he had lost. He glanced back at the silhouette of his pregnant wife in the living room window, but she did not move to stop him. Michael checked into a modest hotel across town, far from the opulent comforts he was used to. Even the basic room with its beige walls and bland paintings felt foreign, a stark reminder of how quickly his fortunes had changed. He spent his first night there staring at the ceiling, tormented by images of Elizabeth's tear-streaked face. In the morning, he awoke to dozens of missed calls and messages. Several were from Sienna, but most were from business associates and tabloids. The news of the Redwood marriage crisis had already leaked, likely spread by staff or so-called friends who thrived on gossip. Michael scanned the sensational headlines. Fairfield County's power couple splits amid cheating allegations, followed by worthless speculation from self-proclaimed insiders. He was furious and humiliated, but most of all, he was devastated for Elizabeth. She hadn't deserved this public spectacle. Text messages from mutual friends offered sympathy or demanded gossip. One from James Carter read, "What happened? Is it true? How can I help?" Michael dropped the phone with a heavy sigh, unsure if any form of help existed for a mess of his own making. Meanwhile, back at the Redwood estate, Elizabeth told the staff not to let Michael back inside. The pain of seeing him had become too great. She moved into a guest suite at the opposite end of the house. Sleeping in the master bedroom had become unbearable, filled with memories of happier times. She told herself she needed space, though her entire being yearned for a comfort she could no longer claim. Teresa Bloom, her attorney, arrived for a private meeting. Over steaming cups of chamomile tea, they discussed legal options. Elizabeth confessed she wasn't entirely sure she wanted a divorce, but she needed to protect herself and the baby. Teresa laid out possible scenarios: a legal separation with a formal arrangement for child support, asset division if she proceeded with divorce, or even the possibility of therapy and reconciliation if Michael showed genuine remorse. "I don't know if I can ever trust him again," Elizabeth whispered, her voice fragile. "But he's the father of my child. I can't just cut him out of our lives entirely." Teresa reached out and squeezed Elizabeth's hand gently. "Trust your instincts. At least this way, you have a roadmap of how to proceed." Elsewhere, Sienna found herself on the outskirts of the fallout. She watched the story unfold in real time on social media and gossip columns. Her plan to force Michael's hand had partially worked. He had been kicked out by Elizabeth. But now, Sienna was unprepared for the public scrutiny and the harsh reality of Michael's downfall. Did she want a man who might lose everything, including his wealth and social standing? Had she overplayed her hand? She mulled over these thoughts in her loft, sipping wine late into the night. A part of her felt a pang of guilt for destroying Elizabeth's marriage, but she also believed Michael wouldn't have strayed if his marriage was perfect in the first place. Still, she hadn't expected such a vicious spiral of events. Michael, in his cramped hotel room, found himself inundated by calls from reporters. His PR manager demanded a statement. He dialed James Carter in desperation. "I can't believe this is happening," Michael murmured over the phone. James sighed. "It's bad, Michael. Elizabeth's got public sympathy on her side. You need to handle this carefully. What do I do? You need to talk to Elizabeth, apologize, offer her everything she needs. Your best shot is at least being civil. If this goes to court, you could lose the estate, a sizable chunk of your businesses, and more importantly, your chance to be a proper father." Michael's chest tightened at the mention of fatherhood. He ended the call and stared at the wall. He realized, perhaps too late, that if he didn't act quickly, he might lose not just his home and reputation, but the unconditional love of his own child. Desperate for a chance to explain himself and hoping to salvage whatever was left, Michael reached out to Elizabeth. It took 3 attempts, but on a Thursday afternoon, she finally agreed to meet him at a small cafe in town. No paparazzi had tracked it yet. and she preferred to avoid further scandalous headlines. Elizabeth arrived first, accompanied by a subdued aura. She wore a simple maternity dress, her hair pulled back in a neat chignon. Michael approached the table, feeling a jolt of guilt upon seeing how much her pregnancy had advanced since their last intimate interaction. She was carrying his child, and yet he had forced her into a situation where she had to protect herself from him. She did not stand to greet him, but merely nodded for him to sit. Michael sank into the chair, trying to steady his nerves. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." Elizabeth folded her hands over her belly, which Michael couldn't help but notice. "We need to talk about co-parenting arrangements," she said, her tone brisk, as if in a business meeting. A pang of sorrow twisted in Michael's stomach. She had once been so warm to him, now reduced to measured indifference. "I want to be part of our child's life," he said softly. "I'll do whatever it takes." She avoided his gaze, focusing on a point beyond his shoulder. "That's easy to say now. But the moment things get complicated, you run off, don't you?" He reached out a hand, but she pulled back. "Elizabeth, I know I've broken your trust. I can't justify my actions, but I can say I'm sorry. I am so sorry." She pursed her lips, a tear threatening to escape the corner of her eye. "Your apologies won't magically erase the pain you caused me. You cheated while I was pregnant. That's a betrayal I never imagined coming from you." Michael's voice trembled. "It was a horrible mistake. I was foolish, caught up in something I thought I wanted, but it never compared to what we have." She let out a derisive laugh. "What we had, you mean?" Silence settled between them, thick with regret. Eventually, Elizabeth took a shaky breath. "I've spoken with my lawyer. You're looking at a legal separation, possibly a divorce. I'm considering all options." He resisted the urge to beg or plead. Instead, he tried to remain calm. "Please give me a chance to prove I can change. Let me go to therapy, counseling, anything. I don't want to lose you or our baby." For the first time in the conversation, Elizabeth looked directly at him, tears swimming in her eyes. "I don't trust you, and I can't keep living in a state of anxiety, wondering where you are or what you're doing." He bent his head in shame. "I understand. You'll move your things out of the house." "I don't want you there," she continued, her voice steady. "I'll have Teresa draw up an agreement for financial support for me and the baby. You will keep away until the baby is born. After that, if you want visitation, we'll arrange it formally." Michael's throat constricted. He had envisioned fatherhood as a shared journey with Elizabeth, late-night feedings together, celebrating milestones. Now he might only see his child on scheduled visits. But he also knew he had no right to demand more. "I'll sign whatever I need to. I want you to know I'm here." Elizabeth's expression softened for a moment, but the hurt remained. She picked up her handbag and stood. "I'll be in touch." Watching her walk away felt like a knife twisting in Michael's heart. He sat there long after she left, staring at the untouched cup of coffee in front of him. His carefully crafted life had unraveled, and all he could do was watch the wreckage he had caused. After weeks of swirling rumors and half-truths, the media onslaught became relentless. Various tabloids printed stories of Michael's fall from grace. Anonymous sources provided juicy details, likely staff or acquaintances eager to sell information. Suddenly, potential investors reconsidered their partnerships with Redwood properties. A scandal-ridden CEO was not the type of figure most wanted to be associated with. Michael's business meetings became excruciating. Clients would either awkwardly avoid the topic or openly question his leadership. He found himself fighting fires on multiple fronts, employees losing morale, banks reassessing credit lines, and vendors discussing alternate ties. Some of his long-time associates quietly distanced themselves, not wanting to be tarnished by the Redwood name as it took a public beating. Behind the scenes, Teresa Bloom systematically froze certain assets in Elizabeth's name. Fearing that Michael might liquidate properties or hide resources, she ensured that a portion of the Redwood estate and shares in Redwood properties were protected under Elizabeth's unborn child. It was a strategic move that effectively barred Michael from using those funds or properties as leverage. Meanwhile, Sienna realized that her affair with Michael had transformed into a liability rather than a golden ticket. She hadn't intended to trigger such widespread chaos. She had merely wanted more from Michael. Now that his empire was crumbling, she worried about her own future. While she had an upscale loft and some savings, she wasn't prepared for the negative press swirling around her name. Gossip columns labeled her a homewrecker, and hateful messages filled her social media accounts. In a last-ditch effort, Sienna tried to contact Michael, hoping they could salvage the relationship or at least support each other through the turmoil. But each time she called, her calls went unanswered. Texts remained unread. Michael was in no position to cling to her when he was fighting for the remnants of his marriage and his standing. Even James Carter, who had stood by Michael through thick and thin, warned him that Redwood Properties was on the verge of collapse if he didn't handle damage control effectively. "You need a public statement of accountability, Michael," James insisted during a late-night meeting in a half-empty bar. "Admit your mistakes. Show remorse. Do something to regain public trust." Michael took a large swig of whiskey, his eyes bloodshot. "I don't know where to begin. Everything's spiraling, and Elizabeth wants nothing to do with me," James sighed, leaning forward. "Then do it for your child. Show the world that you're taking responsibility. That might not fix your marriage, but it could restore some faith in your moral compass." The next morning, Redwood Properties' PR team released a carefully crafted statement where Michael confessed to personal failures, apologized to Elizabeth and the community, and pledged to focus on personal rehabilitation. It wasn't well received by everyone. Many dismissed it as a desperate attempt to save face. Still, a small segment of the public and some business partners acknowledged the effort. Elizabeth read the statement online, her heart twisting. It sounded polished, too neat. The Michael she had confronted weeks ago was raw and broken. This public apology felt more like a corporate press release than a sincere plea for forgiveness. Yet, she couldn't deny that at least it was a step in the right direction. She wondered if there might still be a chance for genuine remorse to shine through. The Redwood mansion stood eerily quiet without Michael's presence. Elizabeth spent her days meeting with lawyers, attending prenatal appointments, and ensuring she had everything set for the baby. At night, she would sometimes wander through the empty corridors, her thoughts drifting to past memories. The empire Michael had built once felt so secure, but now it lay in ruins, much like their marriage. A month later, Elizabeth's due date approached. She had largely shut Michael out, communicating only through lawyers regarding the baby's health and arrangements. Despite her anger and heartbreak, she couldn't bring herself to sever ties completely. She sent him periodic updates about the baby's growth, how she was measuring, what the doctor advised, and so on. Michael clung to these messages like a lifeline. During one of her final prenatal checkups, Elizabeth was surprised to find Michael in the waiting room. He looked tired, dark circles under his eyes, his suit slightly wrinkled. The clean-shaven, impeccably groomed man she once knew had been replaced by a fraught figure, weighed down by remorse and stress. "Hi," he said softly, standing when she entered. She clutched her handbag, startled to see him. "What are you doing here?" He swallowed. "I know our communication has been minimal, but I needed to see how you and the baby are doing. I asked your OB for the appointment schedule. I hope that's okay." She considered telling him to leave, but part of her couldn't. "Well, it's just a routine check. I'm fine." They sat in silence until the nurse called her name. Without a word, Elizabeth walked in, and Michael followed. The doctor, familiar with the Redwood couple, greeted them warmly but took note of the tension in the air. Elizabeth hopped onto the examination table and the ultrasound began. Within seconds, the rapid flicker of the baby's heartbeat filled the room. Michael held his breath, his eyes glued to the monitor, displaying the tiny form. He reached out instinctively, and for a moment Elizabeth let him rest his hand near hers. Tears glistened in Michael's eyes. It was the first time he'd seen an ultrasound in person since Elizabeth had discovered his betrayal. The reality of impending fatherhood hit him harder than ever. After the checkup, which showed the baby was healthy, Elizabeth gathered her things. She paused at the door, turning to Michael. "So, you've moved into a new apartment?" He nodded, attempting a smile. "Yeah, a small place downtown. The business is still shaky, but it's stable enough for now. I just wanted to make sure you're all right." She studied him, noticing the genuine concern etched in his features. It was the same earnest man she had once fallen in love with, but with a deep sorrow she'd never seen before. "I am. Thank you." Before they parted ways, Michael mustered the courage to ask, "Can we have dinner sometime? Just to talk." Elizabeth hesitated, memories of his betrayal still fresh, but also mindful of the fact that this man was the father of her child. "I'll think about it," she said, then slipped out the door. 2 nights later she found herself texting him, "Let's meet tomorrow, 7 p.m. at the bistro near my OB's office." When they sat down to dinner, it wasn't a romantic reunion. Rather, it was an attempt to find a middle ground. Michael was forthright about his failings, acknowledging that he had been selfish. He explained that he'd cut off all contact with Sienna. "It's over," he said, voice trembling. "I don't expect you to believe me right away, but it's true." Elizabeth listened, arms crossed protectively over her stomach. "I'm still hurt, angry, but I want our child to have 2 parents who, at the very least, can be civil. Maybe with time we can salvage some respect between us." He nodded, relief flickering in his eyes. "Thank you. That means everything to me." They agreed that Michael would be present for the birth, but on Elizabeth's terms. He offered to drive her to the hospital when the time came, but she wasn't ready for that level of closeness yet. Instead, she allowed him to be in the waiting room if he so wished. In the final weeks leading up to the birth, Michael tried to make amends in small ways. He sent groceries to the mansion, paid for additional housekeeping to lighten Elizabeth's load, and wrote her letters expressing remorse. She didn't respond to most of his gestures, but she didn't return them either. A fragile, cautious bridge was forming between them, built on the shared love for their unborn child. Whatever the future held, separation, reconciliation, or something in between, there was at least a glimmer of hope. Amid the wreckage of betrayal and heartbreak, the impending arrival of a baby sparked the faint possibility of healing. The Redwood story was far from over, and so ends the tumultuous tale of Michael Redwood and Elizabeth, a story of broken vows, betrayal, and the faintest glimmer of redemption. As their child's birth drew near, both faced life-altering decisions. Would they find a way to rebuild, or would they walk separate paths, forever changed by sorrow and regret? Only time would tell if Michael's remorse could mend the deep wounds he had inflicted, and whether Elizabeth's resolve would soften under the weight of her love for their child.
They say money can buy anything except anonymity from the internet. One crisp summer morning, billionaire industrialist David Harrington thought he'd scored the perfect getaway with a bewitching companion half his age. Sunlit waves shimmered behind them in an Instagram post he never dreamed would shatter his life. Within hours, a fiery storm of comments erupted, accusing the mysterious woman of being someone far more dangerous than she appeared. The rumors spiraled into a full-blown expose that threatened not just David's crumbling marriage, but also his image and legacy. In a single click, the world learned that secrets, no matter how well funded, rarely remain buried. David Harrington had always been a man who commanded attention the instant he walked into a room. At 6 feet 2 inches, with tailored suits that seemed to drape his athletic frame flawlessly, he radiated a polished self-assurance cultivated over decades of hard work and strategic gambles. Born in Chicago to a middle-class family, David displayed an early flair for numbers and negotiation. By the time he was in college, he'd already built 2 small businesses, one reselling refurbished laptops out of his dorm, and another importing artisanal leather wallets from Italy. He was a hustler in the best sense of the word, unrelenting in his pursuit of prosperity. When he turned 25, David took his biggest risk yet. He convinced an angel investor named Richard Carmichael, a man revered for his savvy in emerging markets, to pour $500,000 into a software automation startup David co-founded. It was an audacious move, especially in a market saturated with bigger, more established players. But David's persuasion worked. Within 18 months, the startup was acquired by a larger tech conglomerate, netting David his first major fortune. It was the start of an illustrious career that would see him founding or funding a series of successful ventures into technology, real estate, and even renewable energy. By his mid-30s, David Harrington was wealthy beyond imagination, yet his ambition burned brighter. He was rarely satisfied. Gone were the days of renting modest apartments and living on fast food. He now presided over a sprawling empire, complete with offices in New York, London, Singapore, and Sao Paulo. He jetted around the globe for business deals, indulging in the high-life trappings private yachts membership at exclusive clubs and a mansion perched atop the Hollywood Hills with a ski-line view that glittered like diamonds at night. But hidden beneath the aura of success was a restless void. He was married, yes, to the beautiful and accomplished Sarah Whitmore. They met at a charity event in Los Angeles, bonding over a shared passion for philanthropy. Sarah, an Ivy League-educated lawyer turned environmental activist, had grown up in a similarly middle-class background. She understood David's drive and matched him in intellect. For a while they seemed the ultimate power couple, publicly philanthropic, privately fierce in their love and ambitions. However, time and relentless pursuit of more money placed stress cracks in their marriage. David's constant travel, late-night negotiations, and if rumors were to be believed, unstoppable appetite for new experiences, all weighed heavily on Sarah. As David's orbit expanded, she found herself increasingly sidelined, overshadowed by the gravitational pull of his ambitions. Even the philanthropic causes they once championed together were neglected. David wrote the checks, but rarely bothered to attend the galas or volunteer events anymore. By the time he was in his early 40s, the heart of their relationship had eroded, replaced by polite tolerance and carefully orchestrated public appearances. That was the environment in which David would eventually make a series of decisions, culminating in the scandal that would rock his world. Fueled by ego and weary of the stale comfort his marriage had devolved into, he sought excitement elsewhere. He believed he was untouchable, convinced his well-oiled team of advisors and the iron curtain of wealth could conceal any indiscretions. But David Harrington was about to learn one of life's harshest truths in the digital era. Every secret has a lifespan. All it takes is a single post for an empire's pristine facade to come crashing down. Sarah Whitmore Harrington was no stranger to adversity. Raised by a single mother in a modest Chicago neighborhood, she thrived academically, eventually securing a full scholarship to Columbia University. While her classmates carried designer purses and took spring breaks in Europe, Sarah juggled part-time jobs at coffee shops and university libraries. She took pride in her self-reliance, never shying away from hard work and rigorous study. By her mid-20s, Sarah was practicing corporate law at a prestigious Manhattan firm. She was brilliant, resilient, and notably empathetic. Those qualities caught the attention of an internal pro bono committee, which led her to champion several environmental cases against big corporations. Her compassion for the underdog and her deep sense of justice made her a formidable foe in legal negotiations. She even won a high-profile lawsuit that forced a major chemical company to pay millions in damages to a marginalized community. The victory made headlines, and from that moment, Sarah became recognized not just as a skilled lawyer, but as a warrior for ethical responsibility. That was how she met David at a black tie fundraiser in Los Angeles, where he presented a sizable check to the environmental organization she represented. The sparks flew instantly. In him, she saw a titan with an innate gift for making money, and an equally fervent philanthropic side, an individual who could potentially reshape industries for the better. In her, he saw a steadfast spirit, beautiful both inside and out, and a partner whose intellect could match his. Their courtship was whirlwind. They dined at Michelin-starred restaurants, attended exclusive events, and traveled abroad to meet potential charity partners in places like Nairobi and Mumbai. Within 6 months, they were married in a lavish beach ceremony in Maui, complete with dignitaries, celebrities, and the who's who of venture capital in attendance. However, the transition from newlyweds to a stable marriage was rocky. David's businesses, spread across multiple sectors, demanded constant attention and travel. Meanwhile, Sarah transitioned from corporate law to running her own not-for-profit legal consultancy for environmental issues, an endeavor that required significant energy and focus. They saw each other less and less. The times they did manage to reconnect were overshadowed by David's phone calls, emails, and text notifications. Despite the cracks in their relationship, Sarah believed she still knew David better than anyone else. She sensed when he was exhausted, recognized when his bravado was merely a cover for deeper anxieties. She also recognized as his success soared to new heights that he was falling into certain patterns, seeking novelty, losing interest in things that once mattered, constantly pushing boundaries. But she never quite dared to voice her growing suspicions. She wanted to preserve their public image, and more critically, she didn't want to face the reality that her husband might be cheating. Then the subtle shifts started. David became secretive about his phone, quickly changing screens when she walked by. He started going on business trips to places that made no sense, or at times that were uncharacteristic for the industries he worked in. Once Sarah found a diamond bracelet in his study desk, one that was clearly not for her, as she had never once expressed interest in that style, nor had he gifted her something similar in years. She brushed it off, attributing it to a possible gift for a female investor or sponsor. But deep down, she suspected. Sarah thought about confronting him multiple times, yet her pride held her back. In her mind, relationships were built on honesty and trust, but confronting David without proof felt like a betrayal of her self-respect. She wanted certainty. She needed to be sure. In the quiet corners of her soul, she wondered if it might be easier to look away, to focus on her philanthropic work, and to let David chase his illusions. After all, they maintained a semblance of stability. They weren't short on money. Her beloved mother was comfortable living in a gorgeous townhouse that Sarah and David financed. On the surface, her life seemed perfect. But as the months rolled on, Sarah felt a gathering storm, an anxiety that gnawed at her. Something in her marriage and David was shifting. For all her accomplishments, for all her unwavering character, she was powerless to stop whatever was happening. A sense of impending disaster loomed. She could almost hear the faint thunderclap on the horizon. She just didn't know how or when it would strike, only that it was coming, and when it did, it would change everything. David Harrington first laid eyes on Layla St. James at a private art exhibit in Soho. The event was one of those exclusive gatherings of the ultra-wealthy and avant-garde, a place to see and be seen. She stood in front of a painting, a swirl of neon colors, something abstract and disorienting, and seemed lost in thought. She wore a simple yet elegant emerald green dress, her tawny hair falling in loose waves down her back. David was immediately intrigued by her aura of quiet confidence. He approached her fully expecting that easy spark he often found in conversations. Layla, however, surprised him. She greeted him with polite warmth, but spoke with a self-assuredness and intellectual depth that caught him off guard. She was not overly impressed by his status or money. At least she didn't show it in the usual fawning way. Instead, she asked him questions about his philanthropic endeavors, referencing a literacy program in Southeast Asia that David's foundation had once funded. Few people outside his close circle even knew about that. It was an obscure project, overshadowed by his more flashy contributions. Fascinated by her knowledge, he pressed further. Layla revealed she was an art historian by training, had worked in Europe's auction circuit, and recently moved to New York to pursue her own gallery aspirations. She claimed she had grown tired of the pretentiousness in traditional art circles and wanted to start a space that embraced both established and emerging artists. Over a cocktail in the exhibit's VIP lounge, Layla recounted travel stories from her time in Paris, how she'd negotiated million-dollar deals for rare impressionist works. Her voice dripped with a delicate, almost musical accent. David couldn't quite place a mix, she said, from traveling around the world. In the weeks that followed, they exchanged numbers. David found himself texting Layla at odd hours, discussing art-world politics and eventually drifting into flirtation. Layla reciprocated, sprinkling their conversations with subtle compliments and innuendo that kept David on his toes. It felt like a dance one that David had not experienced in a long time. Sarah had once been his intellectual equal, but now their discussions were overshadowed by property deals, lawsuits, and superficial gatherings. Layla offered something new, something fresh. Their first real date came under the guise of a business meeting at a Michelin-starred restaurant in Midtown. David told himself he was merely exploring philanthropic collaboration, maybe funding an art initiative Layla had proposed. But by dessert, they were lost in each other's eyes. A wave of guilt threatened to crash over David, but he quelled it with a glass of Chateau Lafite Rothschild, rationalizing that he deserved happiness. Life was too short, and he had worked too hard. If he couldn't indulge once in a while, what was the point of all this success? Days turned into weeks, and he found every excuse to see Layla. A hotel suite at the Pierre, a weekend in the Hamptons. David claimed he had an urgent real estate matter to attend to. Layla was always there, radiant, engaging, confident in her allure. But there was something else about her, a certain mystery that David couldn't pinpoint. She rarely spoke about her family or past relationships. She was cagey whenever he asked about the specifics of her work in Europe. His curiosity was piqued, but the thrill of their clandestine encounters overshadowed any red flags. In private moments, Layla would talk about the future, teasing a world where they might be more public in their romance. David smiled, uncertain if he could ever cross that line. He was still tethered by a marriage that he had not fully admitted was over. Yet Layla's world was intoxicating and like a moth drawn to flame. He ignored the risk. The more David's desire grew, the more brazen he became about their affair. Eventually, a reckless idea took shape in his mind. He had a beachside villa in Belize that was rarely used. Perhaps a little tropical escape was just what they needed. Sun, sand, and secrecy far from prying eyes. Layla loved the idea, squealing with excitement at the notion of turquoise waters and private cabanas. They decided on a date, making hush-hush travel plans through David's private jet. In David's mind, this was a contained fantasy, a secret paradise sealed away from the rest of his life. No one would ever know. They would be safe to indulge, if only for a few days. He should have remembered that secrets don't stay buried forever. And with social media's insatiable appetite for drama, a single misstep could set off a chain reaction he'd never see coming. The villa in Belize was a pristine haven surrounded by palm trees, with a private stretch of powdery white sand extending into azure waters. It was the kind of place people only see in glossy travel magazines, one David rarely got to enjoy, thanks to his busy schedule. Layla's eyes sparkled when they arrived. She ran to the ocean's edge, letting the warm waves lap at her feet. David watched her heart fluttering with a mix of excitement and trepidation. Somewhere in the recesses of his conscience, a small voice asked, "Is this worth it?" He silenced it, enticed by the vision of Layla on the beach. Each morning they lounged under canopied daybeds, sipping tropical cocktails and listening to the rhythmic crash of waves. David felt more alive than he had in years. He indulged in Layla's laughter, her spontaneous dances in the sand, the ways she made him forget about corporate boardrooms and stifling responsibilities. This was freedom, no obligations, no routine, just the two of them enjoying life's simple pleasures. On the second day, after a lazy breakfast of fresh mangoes and coffee, Layla teased David with a challenge. "Let's take a picture, something special to remember this trip by." David hesitated. He had always maintained a strict no social media posts policy when it came to his private affairs. But the sunlight was dancing off the ocean, and Layla looked radiant in her turquoise bikini. She draped herself across a beach lounger, beckoning him closer. David relented, pulling out his phone. He snapped a few pictures of them together. Layla's head on his chest, the glimmering ocean behind them. Laughing, they flipped through the shots, choosing their favorites. Layla posted a couple of photos on her own discreet account set to private. She had only a handful of followers, mostly art world acquaintances, she said. David shrugged, telling himself that a handful of people with no ties to his life wouldn't make a difference. Still, he felt a pang of anxiety at the possibility of any slip. Emboldened by the day's carefree vibe, David grew reckless. Late that evening, after a lavish dinner prepared by the villa's private chef, Layla pressed herself against him and giggled. "Let's show off just a bit. Let's make them jealous." She grabbed his phone and teased him with an Instagram story post. "Just a quick shot of the sunset," she said, with a silhouette of them toasting wine glasses. She promised it wouldn't give away too much. "No faces, no location tags," she whispered. Caught up in the evening's romantic intoxication, David acquiesced. He posted it. The immediate response from his followers was mild. People admired the sunset, the luxurious atmosphere. But within minutes, eagle-eyed fans began to notice small details, the shape of a woman's figure in the reflection of the glass door, the second wine glass in David's hand. A few commented, "Enjoying a romantic getaway." David, others posted heart emojis and asked, "Where's Sarah?" That was the first red flag. David ignored it, telling himself it was harmless speculation. The next morning, in a haze of euphoria, David made a grave mistake. While Layla was frolicking in the waves, He snapped a candid shot of her, capturing her face in profile, then posted it to his main feed with a cryptic caption, "A moment of peace in paradise." He truly believed it was ambiguous enough that no one would identify her. He never tagged her account, never mentioned her name. But the internet has a way of connecting the dots. Within minutes, the post garnered thousands of likes. Then came the comments, some supportive, many curious, a few, laced with suspicion. A handful of David's close friends texted him directly. "Who is she?" Some used winking emojis, half joking. Others were more direct, worried that this could blow back on him if Sarah saw it. Unperturbed, David turned off his phone notifications, wanting to stay in their bubble of paradise a little while longer. It was on the final day of their trip that reality began to intrude. Unbeknownst to David, a tabloid blogger had recognized Layla's face from a rumor that had circulated in certain high society circles, an art dealer with a dubious past, rumored to seduce wealthy clients, rumored to have left Europe under a cloud of scandal. The blogger had ties to gossip circles across the globe and had access to hush-hush sources in the European art scene. By the time David and Layla boarded his private jet for the return flight to New York, the blogger was already working on an exposé cross-referencing images and combing through digital footprints. The seeds of disaster were planted, and neither David nor Layla had any clue that a social media storm was brewing. They touched down in New York that evening, stepping back into a world that would soon turn on them with alarming speed. For David, the beach vacation was a blissful memory. For the internet, it became the catalyst for a scandal that would reshape everything he thought he knew about his mistress, his marriage, and even himself. When David checked his phone after landing, he noticed a barrage of missed calls and frantic texts, primarily from his closest business associates and his public relations officer, Jacqueline Nguyen. His heart pounded as he glanced at the notifications. Typically, such a flurry of calls indicated a major development, a collapsed deal, maybe a crisis in one of his overseas offices. But as he skimmed through them, he realized the panic was personal, not professional. "David, call me ASAP." One text from Jacqueline read, "We have a problem on Instagram." Confused and apprehensive, he dialed Jacqueline's number. She picked up immediately, her voice strained. "David, you need to delete that post right now," she blurted before he could speak. "Calm down, Jackie." He attempted trying to maintain composure. "What's going on?" She launched into a rapid-fire explanation. "Your post with that woman on the beach." Someone recognized her. Comments are exploding. There's a rumor swirling that she's a con artist who allegedly scammed an art collector in Paris. People are sharing screenshots, old articles, everything. It's going viral. They're calling her the art world grifter. This is beyond just an affair rumor. This could turn into a full-blown scandal. David's head spun. He had braced himself for gossip about a potential mistress, but allegations of criminal activity took the situation to an entirely different level. He ended the call immediately, opened Instagram, and gaped at the flood of comments. Many asked, "Is that Layla St. James?" Others claimed she was wanted for questioning in Europe. Some linked to half-baked investigative pieces from obscure blogs. And then there were the moral judgments, David Harrington. How could you cheat on your wife with a criminal respect lost? Hypocrite. A real philanthropist wouldn't be with a con artist. Layla, who was seated beside him in his chauffeured car, scrolled through her own phone. He could see the color drain from her face. "David, we need to talk," she whispered, voice shaky. Not willing to address the situation in the car, He texted his driver to head to one of his discreet penthouse properties in Manhattan. He couldn't go home to his mansion. Sarah was likely there, and a confrontation now would be disastrous. Layla's expression was that of panic fused with indignation. "I don't understand why they're saying these things," she kept muttering. "I'm not a criminal." She tried to show him what she claimed were legitimate references from her past employers, though David barely glanced at them. Once they arrived at the penthouse, a sleek, modern space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, Layla collapsed onto a plush sofa. David paced phone in hand, reading through messages from colleagues, PR consultants, and even lawyers. His empire was built on a carefully curated image of competence and ethics. Any hint of scandal could harm investor confidence. And the fact that Sarah, widely respected in legal and philanthropic circles, might soon find out, was another ticking bomb. "I need you to tell me everything," David demanded, voice taut with urgency. "Why are people calling you a grifter? Were you accused of something in Europe? Tell me now, Layla." She exhaled, trembling. "I never scammed anyone. I was involved with a wealthy French collector. Yes, but I left because he was controlling and abusive. He spread rumors about me to cover his tracks. I never faced any charges. None of it is true." David studied her, trying to gauge the sincerity of her words. He had believed her wholeheartedly until this moment, but now his instincts sounded alarms. Something in her eyes. Was it fear, or was it guilt? The swirling chaos of the moment made it hard to read. A sense of betrayal and dread took hold of him. He realized that even if Layla was innocent, the public didn't care. Gossip and scandal had already latched onto them. The internet feeds on controversy, and they had served it up on a silver platter. The damage might already be done. Over the next few hours, David's crisis management team mobilized. He engaged his top-notch legal counsel, pressing them to craft a statement denying any criminal association. Jacqueline orchestrated a digital damage control strategy, locking down comments, removing the offending post, and issuing official disclaimers that any claims about Layla's criminal background were unsubstantiated rumors. But the internet had already taken screenshots. The post lived on in countless retweets and reshares. Worse still, the mainstream media was picking it up now. A celebrity gossip show ran a segment featuring the blurred-out images of David and Layla on the beach with a dramatic voiceover billionaire, David Harrington's rumored Mistress international con artist, or misunderstood muse. Speculative headlines mushroomed across tabloids, often accompanied by pictures of Sarah, his wronged wife looking stoic and poised at past charity events. On top of everything, phone calls from Sarah began lighting up David's screen. He couldn't bring himself to answer. His mind whirled in panic, trying to figure out how to spin this. He composed text after text to Sarah, erasing them before sending any. There was no easy way to explain. Perhaps the best he could do was beg for her forgiveness and attempt some sort of damage limitation. David, Layla said softly, breaking the tense silence. "I need you to believe me. I'm not who they say I am." He looked at her, swallowing the lump in his throat. "We'll figure this out," he managed, though he wasn't sure he believed his own words. But the question that truly haunted him was, had he been duped? And if so, was it just by a cunning seductress, or also by his own naive desire for excitement and novelty? The answer wouldn't remain hidden for long. The internet had taken hold of this scandal, and soon even darker revelations would surface, forcing David to confront secrets far more devastating than an affair. While David and Layla tried to contain the inferno in Manhattan, Sarah Harrington was at home, feeling as though the ground had opened beneath her feet. Initially, she had ignored the handful of texts from friends hinting at David's suspicious Instagram post. She was used to rumors. But then her best friend, Monica Alvarez, sent a message that rattled her. "Please check the tabloids." "I'm so sorry, Sarah." With shaky hands, Sarah clicked a link Monica had forwarded. She saw David's Instagram post, the silhouette of a woman on a beach, and the avalanche of salacious comments and allegations. Her first reaction was numbness, an eerie calm that spread through her limbs. She had suspected David might be unfaithful, but seeing it unfold publicly was a different kind of pain. An hour later, her phone buzzed again. It was her mother, distressed and confused about the swirling rumors. Embarrassment flooded Sarah, a hot flush crawling up her cheeks. She assured her mother she was fine, even though her heart felt as if it were cracking in half. She forced herself to remain steady, telling her mother not to believe everything she read online. But the numbness soon gave way to anger, then heartbreak, then an odd sense of relief. At least now the rumors were in the open. No more doubts, no more illusions. She spent the next few hours pacing the living room, rereading old messages from David, analyzing their marriage from every angle. She felt a mixture of betrayal and odd detachment, as though she were hovering above herself, watching it all unfold from a distance. A short while later, David's chauffeur arrived at the mansion, dropping off a large black envelope. Sarah took it, opened it, and found legal documents inside, some half-baked statements from David's attorneys, disclaimers about the alleged mistress's background, and an apologetic note that ended with, "Please do not speak to the press. I will explain everything." There was no real apology, no admission of guilt, just corporate-sounding instructions. It was like receiving a memo from a CEO to a subordinate, rather than a heartfelt message from a husband to his wife. Furious, she called David multiple times, but each attempt went to voicemail. She left a single message. "You owe me an explanation. David, I'm not some PR problem to be handled." Then she hung up, refusing to try again. That evening, as she attempted to navigate the swirling confusion, she received another unexpected visitor. Michael Whitmore, her cousin and fellow attorney, who also worked for a prestigious Los Angeles firm. Michael was in New York on business and had seen the online furor. He arrived unannounced, a supportive presence Sarah desperately needed. They sat in the living room, the mansion feeling too large, too grand for the gloom enveloping it. Sarah poured them both glasses of wine, her hands trembling ever so slightly. She recounted the situation, her suspicions, the damning Instagram post, the rumors about the mistress's criminal past. She felt exposed, humiliated. Michael listened patiently, asking pointed questions. "So this woman Layla might be a con artist," he said, swirling the wine in his glass. "Do we know if it's true?" Sarah shrugged. "I don't know anything anymore. I thought I knew David, but now I'm not so sure." Michael offered a thoughtful nod. "Look, Sarah, I can help you. Legally. We can figure out your options, whether it's a separation, a divorce, or simply negotiations for your protection. You shouldn't trust his attorneys. They'll protect him first." Sarah sighed, leaning back into the sofa's cushions. "I appreciate that, but I need time to think. My marriage is on the line, and if this woman really is dangerous, I don't want to rush into any decisions I'll regret." Michael placed his hand over hers. "I understand. But be cautious. Men like David with power and money can become unpredictable under pressure. Do what you must to protect yourself emotionally, legally, financially." That night, Sarah tried to sleep, but nightmares plagued her images of David and Layla on a beach swirling tabloids and faceless gossipers pointing fingers at her. The next morning, she decided she wouldn't be silent. If David wouldn't provide clarity, she would find it on her own. She scheduled a meeting with her own legal advisors, ignoring the suggestion in David's letter to remain quiet. She reached out to her charitable partners, confirming that she would continue her activism work, regardless of the scandal. The last thing she needed was for her philanthropic efforts to be overshadowed by her husband's affair. Amid the emotional turmoil, a flicker of her old resolve appeared. Sarah refused to let David's betrayal define her. If anything, it fortified her determination. If the woman in the scandal truly was a con artist, Sarah intended to expose the lies. And if the rumors were false, she would force David to explain why he had put her through this mortifying ordeal. From that point on, Sarah began her own quiet investigation. Friends in the art world, acquaintances in legal networks across Europe, she reached out to anyone who might have a lead on Layla St. James. She had no illusions that discovering the truth would fix her marriage, but at least she wouldn't be a passive spectator to her own humiliation. Little did she know her search for answers would set off the next wave of revelations, drawing her into a labyrinth of secrets deeper and more twisted than she could have ever imagined. Back at David's penthouse, tension hung in the air like a stagnant fog. Layla paced the living room, her phone constantly buzzing with text messages and calls. She ignored most, focusing instead on David, who was huddled over his laptop in a makeshift war room arrangement with his PR team via video conference. The official statements they had released weren't silencing the rumors. If anything, the chatter online seemed to grow louder, especially on niche art world forums. Jacqueline's voice crackled through the laptop speakers. "David, we have to address these allegations head-on. We found some references to Layla's possible involvement with a French collector named Jean-Louis Moreau. He's rumored to have lost a significant sum purchasing forgeries from an unknown intermediary, someone described as an attractive American woman. Some people are linking that story to Layla. We need to refute this or confirm it." "Refute it?" Layla interjected, indignation flaring in her eyes. "It's a smear campaign by a bitter ex. I've told David this already." David sighed. "Do we have any evidence that you didn't do these things?" "Layla." "Something official? Legal documents proving your innocence?" She glowered, crossing her arms. "I never faced formal charges. That's all the proof I have." Jacqueline's voice softened. "That's not enough for the court of public opinion. They want something concrete." With a heavy sigh, David ended the call, promising to regroup later. He turned to face Layla, who was hugging herself defensively. "I need the truth," he said quietly. "I'm not accusing you, but if there's any detail you left out, I need to know." Her eyes flickered. Then she told him her story. Layla claimed she had indeed worked with Jean-Louis Moreau, one of France's most influential collectors, who hired her to help him scout and acquire valuable pieces. According to Layla, Jean-Louis was arrogant and manipulative, eventually pressuring her into a toxic affair. As she tried to distance herself professionally and personally, Jean-Louis began to sabotage her reputation, planting rumors of forgery and fraud. Layla insisted she had zero involvement in any wrongdoing and fled Europe after receiving threats from Jean-Louis' associates. She'd been attempting to rebuild her life in New York, severing all ties with that dark chapter. David listened, half wanting to believe her. The story was plausible enough. Rich men had used their influence to destroy someone's reputation before. But a nagging doubt remained. Layla was still omitting details. "What about the rumors you drugged him and stole money?" David asked, referencing a particularly sensational claim circulating online. Her cheeks reddened. Utter lies. Fabricated. "I don't do drugs. I hardly even drink. I've never stolen a cent from anyone in my life. Don't you see, he's punishing me because I left him." David studied her trembling lip, the tears welling in her eyes. He wanted to comfort her, to accept her story at face value. But the stakes were too high. His empire was in jeopardy, and if Layla was hiding something, the fallout could be catastrophic. Yet the thought of losing her, the excitement she brought into his life, filled him with dread. So he decided to proceed cautiously, choosing to believe her for the moment, but resolved to do his own thorough checks. He called in favors from private investigators he had used in corporate deals. Within hours, they began scouring European legal records, court documents, and any traces of Layla's past, all while David prepared for the next wave of media scrutiny. The scandal showed no signs of abating. Then, in a surprising twist, David's phone rang with a call from none other than Jean-Louis Moreau himself. A few months prior, David had made casual acquaintance with Moreau at a Monaco charity event. Now the French collector was reaching out directly, presumably, to discuss the fiasco. With Layla fidgeting nervously nearby, David accepted the call. On speaker, Jean-Louis' accented voice flowed smoothly. "Ah, Monsieur Harrington. I see we have a common acquaintance." David cleared his throat. "Apparently so. I'd like to get to the bottom of this. You're aware of the rumors." A condescending chuckle crackled over the speaker. "Rumors, yes. But they are not rumors, monsieur. The woman you call Layla St. James, if that's her real name, defrauded me. She introduced me to forged artwork, manipulated me emotionally, then disappeared with large commissions. I have evidence. I attempted legal action, but she slipped away." Layla blanched, shaking her head vehemently at David. David pressed. "She claims you invented these lies because she ended a personal relationship with you." A harsh laugh erupted from Jean-Louis. "Personal relationship? She seduced me for one purpose, to gain access to my network and my finances. I warn you, Harrington, this is a dangerous woman. She is skilled at deception. If you continue to involve yourself with her, your name, your empire, both will burn." The call ended abruptly. Layla broke into tears, insisting Jean-Louis was lying, that he was the manipulator. David stood there, torn. On one hand, he despised Jean-Louis's smug tone and recognized how men of power often rewrite history to blame women. On the other, the man's conviction was chilling. Could it all be true? David's private investigators would soon deliver a preliminary report, but the emotional stakes were skyrocketing. If Layla was innocent, David would stand by her. If she was guilty, he risked his fortune, his reputation, everything. And all the while, Sarah loomed in the background, her silence perhaps more threatening than any media outlet. That night, David slept fitfully, plagued by dreams of forging art and forging love, unable to discern which illusions were real. Little did he know the truth would be more complicated and more shocking than he could ever anticipate. By the following morning, David's investigators had sent a cryptic message. "We have substantial findings. Meeting recommended." He arranged for them to come to the penthouse, carefully scheduling it when Layla would be out. She had departed earlier to clear her head, though David wondered if she was actually meeting someone else. Just after noon, two stoic men in suits arrived, introducing themselves as Morgan Harris and Philip Zhao. David led them into the study, shutting the door behind them. Their expressions were grim. Morgan began. "Mr. Harrington, we've identified 2 separate legal dockets in Paris and Brussels that involve an American woman with a similar profile to Ms. St. James. The name used was not Layla St. James, but Linda McPherson." Same initials, L.M. Philip continued. "The charges were dropped in one case and settled out of court in another. Both involved allegations of art fraud and misrepresentation. The documents list an unidentified male accomplice." David leaned forward, his pulse pounding. "Are we sure this is the same woman?" Morgan nodded. "We have a 78% facial recognition match between photos from archived news articles and the images you provided us of Ms. St. James. A strong likelihood it's her." A nauseating dread coursed through David's veins. "Any sign of Jean-Louis Moreau's involvement?" Philip replied. "He's mentioned in the Brussels docket as a complaining witness. The details were sealed, but we suspect a settlement was reached behind closed doors." David sank into his chair, his mind a kaleidoscope of betrayal and rage. He thought of confronting Layla, but a text on his phone interrupted his spiraling thoughts. "Unknown number. If you want to keep certain secrets from your wife and the public, it'll cost you $5 million. Wire instructions to follow." Accompanying the text was a single photograph, a candid shot of David and Layla in an intimate moment on the Belize beach, far more revealing than anything posted on social media. Clearly, someone had been photographing them. The angle suggested a drone or a long-range camera. And now they wanted money. David clenched his jaw. "I'm being blackmailed," he growled, showing Morgan and Philip the text. They exchanged worried looks, cautioning David not to make any hasty moves. This could be linked to Ms. St. James's alleged accomplice, Morgan offered. "We've seen this pattern before." Seething, David dismissed them. He needed a plan. A quiet hush money payment would only encourage more extortion down the line. Yet ignoring the threat could lead to even greater exposure. And the worst part was the growing suspicion that Layla herself might be part of this scheme, another elaborate con. But a flicker of doubt lingered. Perhaps Layla truly was a victim, and her old accomplice was extorting them both. He decided he needed to corner Layla that very evening. No more half-truths or evasion. He wanted her entire story. If she lied or faltered, he'd cut her off and let the legal system do its worst. But if she persuaded him of her innocence, then perhaps, just perhaps, they could face this together. Hours later, Layla returned. David wasted no time. "We need to talk," he said curtly, leading her into the study. She looked apprehensive, eyes darting to the closed door. He showed her the blackmail text and the incriminating photo. He then presented the investigative report, the name Linda McPherson, the out-of-court settlements. With every piece of information, Layla's face paled further. When he finished, an uneasy silence settled. Layla's lips quivered. Then she began to speak, voice trembling. "I'm not Linda McPherson. That was my sister." A new tale spilled forth, each revelation more shocking than the last. Layla insisted she had a twin sister raised separately after a messy divorce in her childhood. The sister was the one who got entangled with Jean-Louis, forging art and leveraging Layla's identity. Layla claimed she tried to help her sister out of the mess, but it spiraled beyond control. Tears streamed down her cheeks. "I fled to America to escape that chaos. My sister threatened to drag me down with her. I changed my name legally to distance myself from her record. David, I swear I've never defrauded anyone. I thought you'd never understand." so I kept it hidden. David's mind reeled. The idea of a twin, a doppelganger who could have orchestrated these crimes, sounded outrageous, but not impossible. Layla sobbed, claiming her sister was the blackmailer, the one who had been snapping secret photos and demanding money. She's punishing me for leaving her behind, for not bailing her out again. The story was so elaborate, so twisted. David's gut wrenched with conflicting emotions. The puzzle pieces fit a little too well, yet Layla's tears seemed genuine. He remembered how she had always been vague about her family, how frightened she seemed whenever he asked about her past. Could this all be real? Wrestling with his doubts, David found himself making a decision based on a precarious blend of logic and emotion. "If what you're saying is true, we need proof," he said, voice stern. "We'll involve my investigators. We'll find your sister, and we'll end this blackmail." Layla nodded, relieved. "Whatever it takes. I'll do anything." A fragile truce formed between them that night. David, driven by a potent mix of fear, pride, and infatuation, chose to believe Layla at least temporarily. He vowed to protect her from the blackmailer, from the swirling rumors, from everything. Yet in the darkness of the penthouse, as Layla slept fitfully in the next room, David stared out the window at the glowing city lights, wondering if he'd just made the greatest mistake of his life. While David grappled with the twin sister revelation, Sarah conducted her own inquiry, determined to uncover the truth about Layla St. James. Through her legal network, she managed to contact a renowned French attorney named René Fournier, who had once handled a high-profile art fraud case involving Jean-Louis Moreau. Via a series of lengthy email exchanges, Sarah pieced together a confounding puzzle. According to René, there had indeed been an American woman at the center of the Moreau scandal. Someone who used multiple aliases, among them Linda and Layla. Official documents were sealed, but rumors suggested the woman had an accomplice, possibly a family member. René also hinted that the entire fiasco nearly extended into a broader European crime syndicate. But before any formal charges could stick, the woman vanished. Moreau had enough influence to keep the scandal out of mainstream news, presumably to save face. But the rumor mill churned relentlessly behind closed doors. Sarah's instincts told her that David's mistress had some connection to that case, but she wanted concrete proof. She scrolled through obscure websites, reading half-legible Google translations of French tabloids, looking for any mention of sisters or twins. Then she stumbled on a small blog post from years ago that mentioned a sibling duo suspected of art forgery, one rumored to be involved with Moreau. The post cited no official documents, but the narrative was eerily similar to Layla's story. Frustrated, yet fueled by this partial validation, Sarah pressed further. She reached out to an old law school acquaintance in Brussels, who was now a mid-level judicial clerk. Within a day, the acquaintance confirmed that sealed records existed involving a Linda McPherson, but he couldn't access details without risking his career. He did, however, confirm the mention of a sister in the sealed complaint. Sarah found herself at a crossroads. Layla might indeed have a twin, a partner in crime, or a separate individual entirely. Either possibility spelled trouble for David, and by extension, Sarah. If Layla had roped David into a blackmail scheme, the scandal could destroy his reputation and the philanthropic work Sarah herself cherished. The final piece of the puzzle arrived in an even more unexpected way. Late one afternoon, Sarah received a cryptic text from a number labeled Unknown. "Meet me at the Green Leaf Cafe on 5th. I have information about Layla. Come alone." A friend. wary of a trap. Sarah nearly ignored it, but curiosity and a desire to protect herself compelled her to go. She arrived at the cafe, a cozy, dimly lit space, scanning the patrons nervously. A tall, lean man in a baseball cap stood and waved her over. As she approached, he took off the cap, revealing salt and pepper hair. She recognized him vaguely from a magazine cover, Jean-Louis Moreau. Her heart hammered as she sat down, unsure how to proceed. Moreau spoke first, his English tinged with a delicate accent. "Mrs. Harrington, thank you for coming. I apologize for the clandestine approach, but we share a common predicament." She regarded him with cold caution. "You claim to have information about Layla St. James." His lips curled into a faint smile. "Or Linda McPherson, or whatever she calls herself these days." Sarah's breath caught. "So it's true?" Moreau leaned in. "I contacted your husband, but he seems enamored by her. Or perhaps she's convinced him of a sob story. Either way, he is not receptive. But you, Mrs. Harrington, you have more at stake if this escalates further." He slid an envelope across the table. Sarah opened it to find printed emails, photographs, documents linking Layla to a series of art deals with suspicious authenticity. One photo showed a woman identical to Layla holding hands with a second woman, a near doppelganger. Another picture captured them in front of a Belgian art gallery, rumored to deal in forgeries. The timestamps suggested these were from a few years ago. Proof of her partnership with her twin, who is equally cunning. Moreau explained. "They swindled me and they swindled others. I want them both to face justice. But your husband is in the way, blindly protecting her." Sarah felt a swirl of conflicting emotions, bitterness, heartbreak, and a strange sense of vindication. Part of her wanted to lash out at David. Part of her wanted to pity him. She also wondered what Moreau expected from her. Moreau eyed her. "I need your help. Influence your husband to break ties with her. If he continues to shield her, she will only drag him further into the mud. And I suspect her sister lurks in the shadows, planning something bigger. Perhaps the blackmail we are hearing about Sarah, swallowed hard." "What do you get out of this?" His brow furrowed. "Closure, justice, and the chance to salvage what's left of my reputation in Europe. Also a certain moral satisfaction in knowing these sisters don't dupe anyone else." They parted ways with a tense handshake. Sarah clutched the envelope as if it were a time bomb. Her marriage had been on the brink of collapse, but this new knowledge gave her a sense of responsibility. She had to warn David, if only to protect him from sinking deeper into a catastrophic scandal. She also felt a measure of compassion. Despite his betrayal, David was still the man she once loved, and no matter how furious she felt, she didn't want him ruined by these manipulations. That night, she found herself driving to David's penthouse, not entirely sure how she would approach the subject. The envelope of evidence sat on the passenger seat like a loaded gun. She thought of all the ways this meeting could go. Would David believe her? Would Layla be there, spitting venom at Sarah's intrusion? One thing was certain: the next steps she took could determine the fate of both their futures and possibly save David from the greatest betrayal of his life. Sarah arrived at David's penthouse just after dusk, her nerves taut with urgency. The doorman let her in, without question. As she stepped off the private elevator, she found David pacing the living room phone clutched in hand. He froze when he saw her guilt, relief, and dread flashing across his face. "Sarah," he began. She raised a hand. "I know everything. I'm here to stop you from making a terrible mistake." Without another word, she extended the envelope Jean-Louis Moreau had given her. David took it, flipped through its contents, photographs of Layla and her twin emails, detailing suspicious art deals and banking documents that hinted at blackmail. His face tightened with disbelief. "Where did this come from?" he asked quietly. "From Moreau," Sarah said. "He claims Layla and her sister ran a sophisticated art scam, and now she's entangled you in it." David looked stunned. "Layla told me her sister set her up, that she's the victim here." "She also told you she'd be honest with investigators," Sarah countered. "Did she ever show you this?" She pointed to a photo of Layla and her sister, exchanging a thick envelope, both smiling. Before David could reply, Layla stepped out of a side room. Her hair was tousled, her eyes burning. "You're working with that man, Sarah. That manipulative monster." Sarah didn't flinch. "You've been hiding too much. If you're innocent, prove it. I was trying to protect David." Layla cried. "My sister threatened us both. I didn't plan to fall in love, but I did." Everything changed. Before David could react, Layla's phone buzzed. She paled, then bolted toward her bag. Her belongings spilled across the floor, lipstick's wallet and a folded note. Sarah snatched it up. "Swiss wire transfer instructions," she read aloud. "Is this your sister's next payment?" Layla's defenses crumbled. "I was going to handle it. I didn't want David dragged through this." "So you'd rather pay hush money than tell the truth?" Sarah's voice was tight with disgust. David stared at Layla, torn between fury and heartbreak. "You told me we were into this together, but you lied again. I had to." Layla shouted, tears streaming. "I knew if you doubted me, you'd walk away." David's face hardened. "And now I just might." The room fell into tense silence. Then quietly, David picked up his phone. "I'm calling the police," he said, dialing. "Let them figure out who's lying." Layla lunged for the phone, but Sarah stepped in her way. A moment later, the call connected. The decision was made. Sirens approached in the distance. Layla collapsed onto the couch, sobbing. Sarah turned away, fighting back tears of her own, of betrayal, loss, and something like pity. The truth would unravel in the days to come. Investigators would trace the blackmail, expose the twins' identity, and sort through Layla's involvement. David's public image would take a hit, but it would survive. Whether his marriage did only time would tell. But for now, the storm outside mirrored the one within, and none of their lives would ever be the same. Betrayal, scandal, and secret identities. This story proves that even the most powerful among us can be undone by hidden truths. In the end, David Harrington learned the hard way that wealth and influence can't shield you from the consequences of deception. Sarah, despite her heartbreak, found renewed strength in confronting the lies head-on rather than remaining a silent victim. As for Layla or Linda, her fate was sealed by the very illusions she spun, reminding us that the truth always finds a way to surface. If you were captivated by the twists, betrayals, and dramatic showdowns in this real-life saga, help us shine more light on stories that need to be told. Like this video, share it with friends who love jaw-dropping drama, and be sure to subscribe to our channel. Together, we can unravel even more astonishing tales lurking behind the polished veneers of the rich and the restless.